You've probably been hearing the same advice for decades. Get your calcium. Drink the milk. If you're not hitting your daily target, take a supplement. And that sounds completely reasonable. Bones need calcium. Everyone knows that. So you do what you're told. But here's something that almost never gets explained along with that advice. Getting calcium into your body and getting calcium into your bones are two completely different things. And for a lot of people over 60, what's happening between those two steps is not what they assume. Here's what's actually happening with calcium and bone after 60. The body is constantly breaking down old bone and rebuilding new bone. It does this your entire life. But after 60, that balance shifts. The breakdown keeps happening at roughly the same pace, but the rebuilding starts to fall behind. And the gap slowly widens. Calcium is the main structural mineral bone is built from. About 99% of all the calcium in your body is stored in your skeleton. So when that rebuilding process runs short on raw materials, bone density suffers. That's why the recommendation exists. Most major health organizations suggest 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day for adults over 60. The number is real. The reasoning is sound. What the recommendation often leaves out is what happens next. Once calcium is absorbed into your bloodstream, your body has to send it somewhere. And where it ends up depends entirely on whether the right conditions are there to direct it. When those conditions exist, calcium goes to bone. When they don't, and this is the part most people never hear, calcium circulates in the blood without a clear destination, and it has to go somewhere. Here's a simple way to picture what can happen. Imagine you order a large delivery of building materials for your home, bricks, lumber, everything you need. The truck arrives, unloads at the curb, and drives away, but there's no crew there to place anything correctly. Those materials don't disappear, they sit. Some of them end up exactly where you didn't want them, and instead of strengthening your home, they're now blocking the driveway. That's what can happen with calcium in the body when the delivery system isn't working. The calcium arrives in your bloodstream, but without the right biological signals directing it into bone, it circulates. And one of the places it can settle is the walls of your blood vessels. This is called arterial calcification. It's not rare. It's extremely common in older adults, and it's one of the main reasons arteries stiffen over time. Stiff arteries make the heart work harder. They push blood pressure up. They raise cardiovascular risk. So the calcium you've been taking to protect your bones may, under the wrong conditions, be landing somewhere very different. Now, the research on this has been building for a while, and I want to be straight with you about what it does and doesn't show. Several large studies have looked at whether calcium supplements affect the heart. A major analysis published in the BMJ examined multiple randomized trials of calcium supplements, specifically taken without vitamin D, and found a meaningful increase in heart attack risk among people taking them compared to those who weren't. A large European study followed tens of thousands of people over many years. Supplement users had a substantially higher association with heart attack risk, but here's what stood out in that study. People getting their calcium primarily from food didn't show the same pattern, same mineral, completely different outcome, depending on where it came from. Another large U.S. study, called MESA, the Multi-Ethnic Study of Atherosclerosis, looked directly at calcium buildup inside arteries. Higher dietary calcium was associated with less arterial calcification. Supplemental calcium went in the opposite direction. Not every study shows this. Some large analyses have found no clear cardiovascular signal from calcium supplements at all. But the pattern that keeps appearing, food calcium and supplement calcium behaving differently in the body, keeps pointing toward the same question. Why? Here's why they're not the same thing. When calcium comes from food, it enters your bloodstream gradually. Digestion takes hours. The body absorbs what it needs at a pace it can manage. When calcium comes from a supplement, especially a high-dose one taken all at once, the calcium enters your blood quickly. the concentration spikes sharply. And that rapid rise may be more than the body's routing system can handle at once. More calcium ends up circulating without direction, and circulating calcium eventually settles somewhere. The spike is the difference, not the calcium itself. This is why the research keeps pointing to the timing and source of calcium mattering, not just the total amount. So what does the routing system actually need to work correctly? Three nutrients come up consistently in the research, and understanding what each one does changes the whole picture. The first one you've probably heard of, vitamin D. Think of vitamin D as the key that unlocks the door. Your gut has specific doorways, transport mechanisms in the intestinal lining that move calcium from your digestive system into your bloodstream. Vitamin D opens those doors. Without enough of it, most of the calcium you're taking in, whether from food or supplements, passes straight through without being absorbed in any meaningful amount. After 60, vitamin D levels tend to fall. The skin becomes less efficient at producing it from sunlight. The kidneys, which help convert vitamin D into its usable form, change with age. Many older adults also spend less time outdoors than they used to. There's a simple blood test, a 25 vitamin D level, that tells you exactly where you stand. It's routine, easy to request at your next doctor's visit. What the right level is for you depends on your full health picture, which is worth discussing with your doctor. But here's what isn't debated. Low vitamin D means poor calcium absorption. You could be taking calcium every day and absorbing very little of it if your vitamin D is low. That's a problem worth knowing about. The second nutrient is one most people have never connected to bone health at all: vitamin K2. If vitamin D is the key that opens the door, K2 is the GPS that gives calcium an address once it's inside. K2 activates two specific proteins. The first one, called osteocalcin, works inside your bones. Its job is to pull calcium out of the blood and anchor it directly into the bone matrix. When K2 is adequate, osteocalcin is active and doing exactly that. When K2 is low, osteocalcin goes dormant. Calcium arrives in the blood, but nothing is there to lock it into bone. The second protein K2 activates is called matrix GLA protein, or MGP. This one works in your arteries. When K2 activates MGP, it physically blocks calcium from depositing in artery walls. It's the body's built-in protection against arterial calcification. When K2 is insufficient, MGP stays inactive. That protection switches off, and calcium that can't get into bone starts finding other places to settle. The Rotterdam study followed nearly 5,000 people over about 10 years. People with the highest K2 intake had a 57% lower risk of dying from coronary artery disease, 26% lower overall mortality, and significantly less calcification in the aorta compared to those with the lowest K2 intake. What's notable is that vitamin K1, the form found in leafy greens involved in blood clotting, did not show the same cardiovascular association. The effect was specific to K2. A separate large European study found that for every additional 10 micrograms of K2 consumed daily, coronary heart disease risk dropped by about 9%. Now here's the problem. K2 is found primarily in fermented foods, particularly natto, a fermented soybean product common in Japan, but rarely eaten in the United States. Smaller amounts exist in some aged hard cheeses and certain animal products. Most Americans get very little K2 through their regular diet. It doesn't appear on most nutrition labels. Most doctors don't routinely check for it. So when you put this together, many people over 60 are taking calcium supplements, are likely low in vitamin D, and are almost certainly getting very little K2. The picture of what may be going wrong starts to come into focus. Calcium is coming in, but the system that's supposed to send it into bone and keep it out of arteries is missing what it needs to do that job. The third nutrient is magnesium, and it connects to this picture in two ways. First, magnesium is required to convert vitamin D into the form the body can actually use. The enzyme that performs that conversion is magnesium dependent. If magnesium is low, vitamin D can't fully activate, and calcium absorption suffers downstream, even if someone is taking a vitamin D supplement. Low magnesium means less active vitamin D. Less active vitamin D means less calcium absorbed into bone. Less calcium in bone means more calcium circulating without direction, and that's the last place you want it. Second, magnesium is itself a structural part of bone. Roughly 60% of all the magnesium in your body is stored in your skeleton. Studies consistently find positive associations between magnesium intake and bone mineral density in older adults, and magnesium deficiency after 60 is extremely common. The foods richest in magnesium, dark leafy greens, nuts, seeds, legumes, tend to be underrepresented in a lot of American diets. Absorption decreases with age, and some of the most widely prescribed medications for people over 60, certain blood pressure medications, and the acid reflux drugs known as proton pump inhibitors, directly deplete magnesium from the body. Many people taking these medications every day have never been told about this. Here's what the full picture looks like. Magnesium activates vitamin D. Vitamin D enables calcium to be absorbed. K2 routes that calcium into bone and activates the protein that keeps it out of arteries. Remove any one of those links and the whole chain suffers. Looking at calcium in isolation, which is what most standard recommendations effectively do, misses this entirely. It's like trying to understand why a car won't start by only checking the gas tank. So what does the evidence say about the best way to actually get calcium? The research consistently shows that calcium from food behaves differently than calcium from supplements. It enters the bloodstream gradually. It arrives alongside other nutrients the body needs, and it doesn't carry the same cardiovascular signal that keeps appearing with supplements across multiple studies. And you don't need dairy to get meaningful calcium from food. Calcium-set tofu provides around 350 to 400 milligrams per half-cup serving, comparable to a glass of milk. Canned sardines with bones deliver about 325 milligrams per serving. The bones are small, soft, and fully edible, and the sardines come with vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids alongside the calcium. That combination matters. You're not just getting the mineral, you're getting other things that help it work. Canned salmon with bones provides around 180 to 215 milligrams per serving. Cooked collard greens provide approximately 260 milligrams per cup. Fortified plant-based milks, almond, soy, oat, typically contain 300 to 450 milligrams per cup, though how well that calcium absorbs compared to food-bound calcium is still being studied. One practical note on leafy greens worth knowing. Spinach does contain calcium, but it's also high in naturally occurring compounds called oxalates that bind calcium in the gut and reduce how much actually gets absorbed. Lower oxalate options like kale, bok choy, and collard greens are better choices when calcium from plants is the goal. What food sources offer that an isolated supplement can't is the surrounding nutrition: vitamin D in fatty fish, magnesium in leafy greens, K2 in aged cheeses. The whole package is doing work that a single pill simply can't replicate. Now, does this mean calcium supplements are always wrong? No. That's not what the evidence says. There are people who genuinely can't meet their calcium needs through food alone. Absorption issues, dietary restrictions, specific medical conditions. For those individuals, supplementation may still be appropriate and necessary. What the research suggests is worth understanding. Spreading calcium intake across the day, rather than taking one large dose all at once, reduces the kind of sharp blood concentration spike that appears most associated with risk in the studies. A smaller amount in the morning, another later in the day, ideally with meals. That's meaningfully different from one large supplement on an empty stomach. And making sure vitamin D and K2 are are in reasonable shape before adding more calcium to the system makes sense. Whether supplementation is appropriate for any individual depends on their diet, their bone density results, their cardiovascular history, and the medications they're taking. One more thing worth mentioning, because nutrition alone isn't the complete story when it comes to bone health after 60. Exercise. The research on weight-bearing and resistance exercise and bone density is consistent and strong. Bones respond to mechanical stress. When you put load on the skeleton, whether that's walking, resistance training, or any activity that asks your bones to work, it signals the bone-building cells to become more active. A meta-analysis looking at resistance training in older adults found meaningful improvements in bone mineral density at the spine and hip. Studies on weight-bearing activity find similar results. Calcium goes where the skeleton is being asked to perform. A skeleton that isn't being regularly challenged gives calcium fewer places to go, and that makes the routing problem worse, not better. Movement and nutrition work together here. One without the other leaves something on the table. Here's what this all comes down to. The advice to pay attention to calcium after 60 is not wrong. Calcium matters. Bone health matters. The concern is real. But calcium alone, without the system in place to direct it, is an incomplete picture. And the research suggests that high-dose supplementation, particularly when vitamin D and K2 are low, may not be doing what most people assume it's doing. What's worth knowing and worth bringing to your next doctor's visit? What your vitamin D level actually is, because it's easily measured and commonly low after 60. What role K2 plays in bone and arterial health, because most people have never heard of it in relation to any of this. And it may be the most overlooked piece of the entire picture. And whether the current approach to calcium, in terms of both source and amount, is actually working the way it's intended. Strong bones and healthy arteries are not competing goals. The biology supports both when the full system is working. I hope this was helpful. Stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.